Good evening. Good to be with you tonight. We are going to look at, again, Hebrews chapter 11. And it is, of course, the chapter of faith. It is I guess you would call it almost the Hall of Fame of the Old Testament, I would call it. Many of you go to the Hall of Fame, the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. That's my favorite. Football Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame. You can go to different ones. Here in the Bible is the Hall of Fame of the Old Testament, and this is what it is. In the Hall of Fame, to be famous in the Old Testament is, I think, the greatest thing that you can have, and what you have to have is faith. Faith. This is the heroes of faith. We are going to look at one character now. We have looked last week at Enoch, and we looked at Noah. Now we are going to look at and start the story of Abram, or Abraham as we know him. In chapter 11 and verse 8, we find it says, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. Now, this is unique because he didn't know where he was going. I guess that means he hadn't been there before. Isn't that right, brother? He hadn't been there before. So he was going to a strange place, a place where he had not been before. He did not know where he was going. And we can see by faith, he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs of him of the same promise. See, the promise was to him, but not only was it to him, it was to his heirs also. His sons, his grandson, and even all the way down to his great-grandson and great-grandson. It was a promise that was fulfilled. We're going to see that the promise was there. He believed it, even though the promise was not fulfilled in his lifetime. But it was fulfilled some hundreds of years later. We can see what happened. It says he dwelt in tents in the promised land, he and his descendants. It says, for he waited for the city which had foundation, whose builder and maker is God. He dwelt in a tent waiting for the city of God. Today, so oftentimes we sing a song. I love the song. We have a mansion over the hilltop. We sing about a mansion. Why? Because we need to realize that what we have today, we may have a new home, a brick home, a two-story home, or whatever, but compared to what God has for us, it's a shack and it's a tent. Because God has something waiting. He had something waiting for them. He was happy in a tent. As a matter of fact, this holds even more weight if you think of where he came from. Because where he came from was basically almost the heart of civilization at his time. The valley that he came from, that was the New York, that was the Paris, that was of his day. I mean, that's where the heart of civilization, and they had even plumbing in some of the cities of that day. And he went and lived in a tent. But he what? He dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents. For he waited for the city, which was foundation, was builder, was made, is maker, is God. It says not only this, it says by faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a son when he was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. We don't realize, but this faith he had was not a faith that was not shared with his wife. Oh, some people said, well, you know, she laughed. Some people said well, every man of faith, even Abraham lied about his wife. He had his non-perfect being. I hate to tell you this. I'm not perfect. And something that may be even harder for you to believe, you are not perfect either. I've heard men tell me that they've been a Christian for 30 years and never sinned. Well, my only answer to that is, you know, that's pretty good. Christ, the only other person I knew of that was faithful that long and didn't sin. I wonder why God let him die. Why didn't he wait for you? I mean, we sin. But we have the grace of God, the love of Jesus, and the Holy Spirit that we are able to be and stay saved. What I'm saying, they had faith. These men was not perfect. This woman was not perfect, but they had what? They had faith. Enough faith that they believed God could forgive them when they needed forgiveness. And they had that faith even though they was waiting for a city. The foundation and builder was God. And it says, she judged him, that is God, she judged God faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, was born as many as the stars of the sea, in the multitude, in numbers, as the sand which is by the seashore. This is telling what happened. The Israelites became, his descendants became to the point that nobody ever knew how many. They became so populated. And to give you a little example of how many there was, in the Roman kingdom, the kingdom of Rome, in the time of Christ, the Roman authority estimated, and they kept track of the people, that 1 out of 10 of their subjects was Hebrew or Jews. 1 out of 10. Somebody said, well, that's a lot. Well, that's not even counting the one that was still in Babylon, over the other. That wasn't counting those that had gone to Ethiopia in Africa. The Jews was even beyond the Roman kingdom. And they had been so great. And it says that because of the faith, this old man and this old woman never had a child. She had a child. She had pleasure. Had a child when she was, I think 90 years of age, and him almost 100. They had this child. It says, and they became, because the promise was, and we look at this, we need to realize too, the promise was made that they would become a great nation, his descendants, that they would receive the land that he had showed them, the land that we call Palestine, they called Canaan, they called the promised land, that they would receive that. And also the other promise that we're going to get to in Hebrews, and what it's so much about, is the promise that through his seed all the nations of the earth would be blessed. And Paul said in Galatians, he said, not as of seeds as to many, but seed as of what? One. Here we have this man of faith. Because of his faith and her faith, we had to know that Jesus came. It says in verse 13 of Hebrews 11, these all died in faith, not having received the promise, but having seen them afar off, was assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. I like that. They was pilgrims and strangers on the earth. Not just in Palestine, not just in Egypt, but they knew that there was some place beyond the earth. And this kicks the hole in some people's view that says, you know, God is going to come back and set up a kingdom here on earth. But he said they realized he had built a city, and they were strangers and what? Strangers and pilgrims what? On the earth. For these For those who say such things declared plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have opportunity to return. If they just wanted the pleasure on earth, Abraham would have went back home to that great cities, that great civilization that was far beyond anything in Palestine for another 1,000 years. But he realized there was something. But it says, verse 16, but now they deserve a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. He has prepared a city for them. The Hebrew writer wrote this. Jerusalem was there, but that's not the city that was prepared. I know that. You should know it too. Because Jesus, when he left the earth, what did he tell those disciples? What did he tell you and I? He said, I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. The place that was made for Abraham and Sarah is the same place that Jesus and God has created for you and I to be with him. Yea, I'm looking forward. I hope that I can say and realize that I'm looking forward to be with Abraham, because I have confidence that Abraham is with God. God be with you till we meet again.